My name is Steven Maybury. I'm an Irish artist. I'm currently living between Rotterdam and Dublin. I came to Rotterdam to undertake a master's in the OUT Voor, and I'm just about to finish. My practice was largely a drawing-based practice before I came here, and now has really undertaken some sculptural and installation elements. A lot of the work I make is multi-medium based, a lot of different aspects being pulled in between lived life to different kind of experiences, to dreams, to me negotiating concepts in my mind, and I suppose the studio is where these things come together and maybe new thoughts are made. My interest in my work would probably be how I navigate the world. I think it's what draws me to making art would be a way to understand the world. And I think of it very much of like a digestive system that I take in lots of different informations and like a metabolism. They go through me, and then at the other end comes artworks, which then I renegotiate again quite often. So I think of very much of my art practice being a way to make sense of the realities that I live in and work in, and they tend to be quite exciting for me. So, a mentor. Well, recently in the OUT Voor, we had a tutor called who would be an art writer and critical thinker and all-around lovely man. And he's been particularly helpful and inspiring and encouraging of my practice for the last 2 years, giving really immense dialogues and direction in terms of making work. So at the moment, reading a lot of Jan's own text as well as the text that he's recommended, I feel has really helped my practice grow. So I would consider it to be a mentor over the last 2 years for sure. The processes of my work really vary, from having a background in photography to having, as I mentioned, a heavily drawn-based practice to incorporating new sculptural elements and then coming together to kind of create installations. The processes are becoming varied and wide and even service-based, from utilizing different ways of living, ways of being. So even offering or paying for different types of services in my artworks and fabrications has become quite integral as the artworks or the materials themselves. Other aspects of my processes is largely experimental. I might form ideas in my head which, similar to what I think Octavia Butler points out, is called primitive hypertext, where I might be generating ideas or concepts based on several different inputs. So I might be reading something and I might be cross-referencing that with, say, a 1930s cookbook, and then reading maybe some industrial process research papers, and then seeing what is coming out of all of these moments. And I suppose the meeting place is my studio, and then the artworks to kind of launch new ideas that come out of these. And I find that one of the more integral moments or parts of my artwork is trying to find poetic qualities in more of the I suppose the rigid or the visible, sometimes invisible processes that we might find ourselves engaging in, such as industrial processes, and to try and get away from just the hard-lined end goal, end result, and try to keep some of these dialogues far more open. So for instance, a lot of the work that I've been making recently has been based on industrial processes, got to do with the camera as an apparatus, and diving into that world of different materials, but also I suppose the incredible states we put materials into through different types of processes, and thinking of these as kind of these fetishized states, to then work within those parameters to see what comes out. And one of the works that I've been, I suppose, creating work with is this beautiful material called silicon carbide, which is an invented synthetic abrasive in 1891, and then 2 years later on it became, it was discovered to be an organic material forming as discovered in a meteorite. And only recently this material has become such a heavy-handed game, a central game player in the world of industry, particularly through, say, telescopes or cameras, or different types of abrasives like sandpapers, even bulletproof vests. I was really drawn to its kind of cosmic relations, and that sent me into a world of research, and I discovered that recently, actually only this year, the exact material became known as the oldest thing we have even considered on our planet, which means that the solar grains of this synthetic material which we've invented found which hold the exact same properties as the material in the organic meteorite, predates our own solar system and our own sun, so an ancient beyond ancient. And that's what a lot of my work kind of looks at, is trying to find more larger dealings and operations with I suppose the material extremities that we synthesize or we use in order to make commodities or make the things that we like to have in the world. I'm pushing, I suppose, the foundations of these materials further through our imaginations to be able to create a much nicer way to live with them, maybe, I would think. My first artwork, I remember my first artwork actually. My father was a picture framer, so I grew up framing pictures for a long time. And I remember seeing these paintings, and as the typical person might often do is say, oh, I could paint that. And I remember being about 7 or 8 years of age and getting this wildly abstract painting of the Atlantic coast of the west of Ireland and saying I could paint that. And then my dad buying some palette knives and some paints and some putty, and then making this thing, and then framing it, and him being super proud, and me going, well, yeah, I could do it, I could make his painting, and I was never really happy with it, but it still exists in my parents' house as my first artwork. And I don't think I made any artworks for maybe, 15 years after that, but that's the first one I consider. The work that I'm making now is, I'm currently working on my graduation work, where I'm creating an installation based on, I suppose, industrial planetary processes, which I'm calling plantations. So I'm making a series of steel trees, steel plants that are kind of host an ecology. So they might be using particular pickling materials or kind of alchemic material-based processes that would be related to, say, e-waste or technology purifications, e-waste disposal of works in illegal dumps that I've previously worked in the Far East. I'm merging these with some of the newer technologies, the fruits of these kind of progresses, such as the silicon wafer, and I'm creating these kind of locked-in ecologies to kind of show, to kind of think about where we are with how we use information and communication-based technologies. And I'm very interested in our planetary involvement in how we utilize these materials, resources, and how we want to continue with them in more of a sustainable manner. And I suppose I use and take apart the camera, as my background is I'm a photographer, but I choose the camera because not only can I speak quite globally with it, but there's also a lot of comparisons in the industrial processes of cameras manufacturing, or the materials involved in a lot of photographic practices that speak so closely and similarly to what is actually happening with some of the advances in computational photography. So in terms of how we're rendering ourselves, how we're recording ourselves. I find that in the processes of the materials that we get to these stages to record ourselves, there's a lot of really hidden beauty and gems in there that I think are very relevant to talk about as we move forward into a more digital and data represented world, I think. 2020 lockdown, coronavirus. It was very peculiar for me in the way that I was still in university. I'm still in university. We're currently in my studio. And the doors closed, and I suppose I'm away from home, and I was locked in a house in a place that I'm not overly familiar with. So I really felt that the limitations were difficult, and the learning restraints were quite difficult in undertaking a master's. But I was fortunate that I was starting a thesis, so I had an awful lot of research and reading to do. But one of the things that really kept me, I suppose, working was feeling confined. And this is where I suppose the silicon carbide work came out of, is that walking became a huge part of my life, as most people did, and their whatever amount of minutes per day they went out, and whatever radius. And I found myself, looking on the same routes that I would take almost daily. I would be looking down and I'd find these wonderful sparkles underneath the sun. And I realized I was almost like sandwiched between stars. I was looking up at stars occasionally, and then I'd look down below me. And this intrigued me. So from this continuously walking, I began to document this process. And then I began to research this material. And then I ended up sourcing the material and then working with it. And that, after about a years of research dealing with this particular material that I got such a huge feeling from, turned out to have these potentials that I could actually reach further in time, possibly, or even in different realms of your mind, further than I could imagine ever being possible to, even outside of a lockdown restriction. And this came from a very intimate relationship and feeling confined with the material, which then allowed me to think about this material and discover its very ancient contexts. Yeah. My plans in 2021 are to finish the masters, and I'm really excited because my work is after gaining a little bit of momentum, in the sense that I feel like I have some meat on a project that I really want to continue, and I'm quite excited to open up that process to invite designers to work with me in order to engage a collaborative process to kind of to forming some new ideas, or forming some new works, and that's going to be working with I suppose some text that's also quite new to my practice, and trying to create, I suppose, a world within this text, and looking for a particular type of atmosphere. I'm quite excited about the collaborative process. Later on in the year, I'm expected to have some exhibitions, which the details are just being rolled out at the moment. But I feel like after the 2 years, particularly in a master's, I'm at this very beginning point. It was a nice place for me to kind of like recalibrate my thoughts. I treated it like a 2-year residency of like building up these kind of new strengths within my practices and new directions in my practice. And it's been very beneficial. But I found myself at this beginning point of research, and I'm really excited for it to continue.